Hello, my friends. This is Andy over the Andy Falco Show, coming to you live on Tuesday, 5:30. I bumped it up. Those of you that were expecting it to be on 6:30, I apologize. I had to move it up because I have to take my son to karate class. Yesterday, I found out that the karate dojo opened up, and so it started at 6:30. His class starts at 6:30, so I've had to change it. Before we get started, I'm going to be talking about how the media and the attorney of the attorneys that are doing these press conferences, that's what it's called, are really, truly lighting a powder keg that is going to go off. And I know that many of my shows lately have been not, I like the last little graphic on my intro video that talks about shenanigans. I love having a good time, joking around, having singers on, that kind of stuff. But this isn't, unfortunately, the time for that. And so I don't want to apologize for the tone of my last shows, because the tone is absolutely necessary. And those of you that are being quiet because you're afraid to speak your mind, I am sorry. It may be time for you to speak up, because things are going very poorly in our world. And so let me just talk about the sponsors. I know it's always tough. I start off in the very negative, and then, hey, let's talk about my sponsors. Let's talk about Happy Coffee. Today'shappycoffee.com. Go to today'shappycoffee.com to learn about this great coffee. I'm drinking it right now, as a matter of fact, to make sure I get a little boost to go to karate tonight. And it has hormone enhancing ingredients. People have been known to lose a lot of weight after consuming the coffee for a period of time, and it just simply makes you happy. So let me have a sip. It doesn't help you speak, apparently. A happy sip. Wow, it's still hot. Okay. And so that's today'shappycoffee.com. It's fantastic. The flavor is good. They also have creamer. They also have something called Zest, which you add to water and like you do the coffee, and it's got a lemony flavor, and it's fantastic. Today's CBD oil for CBD oil like this, made by Viseo. It's got the best formulation of CBD on the planet. It has liposome technology, which allows the nutrients to get in your body. And as I always say, Viseo is one of the top 50 healthcare companies in the world, which means they're doing it right. And then today's Viseo.com. Visit that to get some great supplements for health, losing weight, anxiety, depression, things that it potentially can help you with. I can't tell you that it can, or else the FDA will shut me down. All right, so go to today's Viseo.com. All right, so over the last couple of days, I've been talking about the Rayshard Brooks shooting in Atlanta, and it's just really taken the focus away from George Floyd. Right, George Floyd was clearly an officer who went too far. He's been arrested and charged with murder, rightfully so, based on every angle that I've watched. There's no excuse for what that former officer did. And so that is different, right? That is justifiably, he has been placed under arrest, and so have the other officers. I feel sad for two of the officers who only have 4 days on, and one of them has 3 days on at the time. I'm not sure that they deserve to be convicted of murder. I think that there are some videos where they said, hey, dude, can you get out? Why don't you get off his neck? But at least one, if not two of the officers will probably for sure be convicted. And I cannot see how they will not. And everything will be fine for the most part, unless something comes up. I don't know what could come up to get those two officers out of that predicament they're in. The only thing that can possibly happen is that they could plead their way out of it as far as the murder 2, and they can drop it down to a murder 3 or some type of manslaughter. And then we could probably have a little bit of an uproar in the streets about that. So that'll be something that we'll have to find. But that is our legal system. That's how it works. All right. So, but I want to talk about Rayshard Brooks and the absurdity that officer, number one, was fired, and number two, that he's looking at possibly facing charges. And number one, he shouldn't even be fired. So, of course, I don't believe that he should be facing charges. It is ridiculous. He was defending himself. He was doing the right thing. People, these attorneys that get on and do these press conferences for the family are really lighting a powder keg, because they're telling everybody in the world that, and I've heard it again, even just today, and the media is not helping, because they're showing these statements that are completely untrue, that the cops did not give him a sobriety test, that the cops did not give him a breathalyzer, that the cops were scared, that the cops are untrained, that the cops only went to the call to bust some heads. All these things are continuing to be said. They're continuing to be fed out through the media. There's no contrary reporting or a talking head that'll come on and say, oh, no, you're wrong. That's not what happened. Here's what happened. They don't ask me to be on the show and to say, hey, what do you think as a former police officer and someone who investigates activity by law enforcement officers that is wrong, as what I've done for the last 20 years. And I've gone on the stand and spoke against officers. I personally have done that. I've investigated them and said, no, the officer did not do right here, and got on the stand and do it. Nobody's asked me for my opinion on any of these television shows. I'm not sure that they will because they don't want to hear an opinion like mine. The opinion like mine is through 30 years of doing this job and investigating police officers and telling you that the officer did nothing wrong. He did not violate any procedure manual. He didn't violate the steps when determining what type of force to be used. They went from one step to the next step to the next step. It happened very quickly, very fast, right? Can you make a decision that fast to go from hands-on to taser to gun in that split of a second when things are happening so quickly, when you know people are around, when you're trying to save lives, when you're trying to, initially, the arrest was to protect him. The arrest was to protect him. That's what they're forgetting, because he had no idea where he was. They're not showing that on any show that I've ever seen. They've never shown, as far as I could see, on any news channel or any report that I've seen through the media, that at the time that they asked him if he knew where he was, that he had no idea where he was. And what they're telling you is, well, they just simply could have let him go. To do what? To wander around drunk, to get hit by a car, to wander around drunk and be taken advantage of in a robbery of some sort, to walk around drunk in an area that he said he's somewhere else. He doesn't know where he's at. The arrest was to not only press charges against him for driving the vehicle to that location while he was drunk, and not only for being drunk in public, which is a separate crime that they could have charged him with, and probably we're going to charge him with. But it's not just for the crime that he was committing. There's also a duty to not allow this man to get back into a car, to get an Uber, to go somewhere into the neighborhood of which he didn't even know where he was. All of that is it's contrary to anything that I've ever been trained. The officers did exactly as they were trained, and they were following the procedure. And instead, the attorneys for the family are getting on daily. The media is reporting not only on MSNBC and CNN, but also on Fox, and they're giving you a false story as to what happened. They keep repeating, he was shot in the back as he was running away. He was shot in the back as he was running away. He was shot in the back as he was, that's all you hear. They forget the part where he turned and the weapon, the taser, and had it up towards his face. He is not trained to use that taser, number one. When you're trained to use a taser, it is actually a pretty safe tool to use to take somebody down. But in the wrong hands, it's actually very dangerous. Not to mention that if you hit an officer with it and he goes down, now the suspect has access to any and all weapons that officer has to use, not only against the officers that's down, but the officer that's now approaching from behind. And none of that is being said. What is the problem with that, you say? Is that because I was around during the Rodney King riots, and the riots occurred. Much of the reason they occurred was because the expectation was that the officers were going to be convicted. You kept hearing how bad they were. You kept hearing that how they were horrible people, that they were racist. They were all these things, right? Everything about them was, and then they weren't convicted. And what happened? All hell broke loose. Do you not think that that's what's going to happen now? Based on what I've told you, I don't know if one of two things are going to happen. Maybe three things. Let me think. I think I had 3 points earlier. Now I only have two. One is that the right thing will happen and they are not charged. That should, three things. That was the third thing. So the right thing that will happen is that they're not charged. That's the right thing that should happen. Do you understand? The right thing is that for sure the officer that shot him is not charged. The second officer, he can't be charged for anything. But do you think that now, based on what they've been told, they being the Black Lives Matter, the people who really don't care about Black Lives Matter, just let's get that straight right now, don't. Don't fool yourself into thinking that Black Lives Matter really thinks that Black Lives Matter, because they're protesting the wrong thing. Number one, and they've never made any changes when Black Lives were earlier. Remember, Black Lives Matter is the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party has done nothing for the Black community for decades in all of these communities, just so you understand that. And you probably do, but I just want to make sure you understand it. And so you have this organization who's fueling the fire. They're feeding off of the attorneys that are coming on and giving you bad information and literally lying, because they've seen all the video and they are lying to you and have been lying to you for a few days now. The media has been supporting these lies by airing it and also repeating without filling in the blanks of the truth with the truth about what actually happened. And what our duty is as law enforcement. Our duty as law enforcement is not only safeguard the community, but also safeguard the life of the suspects. And they tried to do that, but he fought them. He turned a misdemeanor, a very just a soft misdemeanor, into a full-fledged felony. I was going to use another word in there. I'm being careful. Turned it into a felony. He turned it into a felony, not the officers. He turned it into a felony with punching them, fighting with them, stealing a weapon, running off, and then shooting at them. He turned it into a felony. That's what he did. He did that, not the officers. They keep turning this onto the officers. This is not the officers' issue. It is not them. They did everything by the book. They were as nice as they could possibly be, and they were stuck with a situation where they could not let him go. I keep hearing people say, well, they could have let him go. No, they could not let him go. All the training, all the way back in 1984, I was told you can't let somebody that's that drunk go if you don't have something you could do with them. I have driven suspects home. I have. But he was so drunk, he didn't know where he was. It was like beyond what I've helped people with. Most people, they go, well, yeah, I know I'm at the Noggles here in La Mirada or wherever in Anaheim, and I should have been driving. I would say, where do you live? I live like 2 blocks around the corner, and they really do live 2 blocks around the corner. See the difference? Because you could say, okay, let me just drive you over there. Don't do it again. I didn't care if they were black, Mexican, or white, just so you know. I didn't do it just for white people. But those are things. But these things you're being told is that they could have done all these things. Well, they couldn't because he didn't know where he was. Well, they knew who he was. Yeah, but their job is not. They're not go from law enforcement officer to Uber, and they're not going to drive him to another county or wherever he was actually from, which was a distance based on what the conversation was, because he thought he was somewhere else. You know, if it's 2 blocks down, if it's a couple streets down, but if it's another county over, I never drove anybody from Orange County to LA County. I never drove anybody from Orange County to San Diego County or Riverside County. No, they would not ever allow me to do that. If I would ask my sergeant, hey, I got this guy, he's really drunk. He doesn't know where he's at. And he thinks his girlfriend was here, but she's not. Can I drive? Do you mind if I drive? And he would have said, what? No, you need to either hook him up or if he's not drunk, then you let him go. But if he's too drunk, you can't let him go if he's too drunk. Right. And so you got to arrest. There's no, I would have been the laughing stock of the world at that point. And so the problem is the media is, they're setting all of us up for a huge fireball of an explosive riot. Because I'm telling you, unless the DA has no guts and he's spineless, he will try to press charges against this officer for shooting him. He will try. And a lot of things happen, right? They can move what would eventually be a trial to another location, because do you think he's going to get a fair trial in Atlanta? No. Do you think they're going to have just black people on the jury? No. Do you think that the truth will not come out where they have to play the entire video and show that the officers were not scared? They will show that the officers did everything by the book. There was nothing that is against any policy that I ever read, ever. Right? They can make all these claims where he could have. No, there's a lot of things that you think he could have, but he truly cannot. Based on policy, based on law, based on what his duty is to the citizens of that community and what his duty is to that subject that he's talking to. Right? And so, oops, sorry. Wow. Just messed up my mic there. Sorry. Getting excited here. And so we are in deep crap. I'm telling you, especially the people in Atlanta, because when he, again, they either are going to not prosecute, which I don't know. Gosh, I wish I could tell you, but the amount of pressure that they're under to try to find, and that's why they've not done it yet, or else they would. If it was clear, they would have already placed him under arrest, because they wouldn't want to let what happened in Minneapolis happen in Atlanta. If it was so clear cut, he would already be hooked up and already in jail. They were quick to fire him. That's easy to do. You can fire anybody for anything, not lawfully. He's going to sue to get his job back. But I bet you he's going to sue to get his job back, but not take his job back. He'll take the money. That's what I would do. But man, I don't know what they're going to do over the next couple of days. If they don't do something, they're going to either have to just get it over with and say, hey, we don't have enough to convict him. There's nothing against the law for what he did. They should do that. And then they should just get it over with. They should bring in the National Guard, fill the streets of Atlanta, fill the streets of New York, fill the streets of Seattle, fill the streets of Los Angeles, because it's just not going to be Atlanta. You understand that, right? It's going to be all over the place. We need the National Guard to come in, and they're going to have to make the announcement, hey, we don't have enough to file charges against this police officer. As a matter of fact, we have to give him his job back. They make that announcement based just because what the media has done and the attorneys have done up to this point. I'm telling you, I don't want to bring doom and gloom to you, but based on my experience with the Rodney King riots, that was nothing compared to what's going to happen, because they've set all of us up for a huge riot. And I couldn't sleep last night because I kept thinking about this show that I was going to do. Do I need to warn people? I went to the gun range yesterday, picked up a couple extra weapons, and some more ammunition, just because I need to make sure that my children are safe and need to protect them. And so this is a really important time. And I thought I have a duty, based on what I know, that if he's not charged, that the riots will happen. They need to move in the National Guard right now, and get them prepared. They may be doing that right now, as far as I know. I don't know. I don't know for sure. Nobody that I know of, as far as my sources, have heard anything like that. But at least I've not heard yet. The other thing that could happen is they could press charges from all the pressure and just go, let's just see what happens. Let's make him the sacrificial lamb. And now they press charges, and then a year down the road, when they finally get this to court, which is what it's going to be. I have cases that are 2 years old that I'm getting, 2 to 3 years old. So who knows when this one will go? They may try to speed things up to get them in. But again, they're going to move the jurisdiction somewhere else. So they'll move the trial to some other venue out of the city, out of the county. I don't know where they're going to take it. But eventually what will end up happening is that this officer will be vindicated. And when that day comes, it'll be bad. The only thing that I can think is, if enough time goes by where they do charge him and they do convict him because of pressure, and not based on law, not based on the procedure manual, not based on anything, that he's a sacrificial lamb, and they charge him, over time, he will get enough appeals and get to the Supreme Court. And there's no way. I'm telling you, I've done this for a very long time. I've spent more time in court than almost anybody that I can think of in the United States, on the stand, testifying in court. I don't know anybody that's testified as much as I have. And I've never really said that out loud to a bunch of people, but I've been on the stand. I've been in court more than most attorneys. And I'm just telling you, I could be wrong, but so far, if you guys have been watching my shows for the last couple of weeks, I've not been wrong yet on any of my predictions of what's going to happen. Let me show you a couple of things, and I just want you to keep this in mind. And this is important because again, we have this huge narrative, and we have this thing that we've been told that how bad police officers are. And so there's a couple of things I want to show you as to why I think if they change the venue, that he probably will not be convicted, and he will be found innocent of any charges. And that is because when we really look at use of force, where officers shoot and kill somebody, it's not what you're being told. And I've shared the stats with you, but I'm going to compare two jobs. There's another word for it. Two industries. I guess that's a better way of putting it. Two industries where it involves human beings that have somebody else's life in their hands. What are those two things? Well, one of them is law enforcement, right? We have the most power of almost any job description out there. Almost any, other than what? Doctors, right? Sometimes we just have to trust a doctor. All right, we're going to put you under and we're going to put this thing in you and then we're going to slice you open and then we're going to peel back your chest, right? So, and you go, okay, right? I'm in your hands. I don't know what to do, right? And so that's a lot of power. But same with law enforcement, we have tools that takes people's lives, right? And all we've been hearing about how horribly trained we are over the years. I have told you just the opposite. We are so trained that you almost can't get cops on the street because we have so much training going on. I went to San Luis Obispo for a week for training. And then the next year I went somewhere else for a week for training. And then I would travel around and I would train officers for weeks at a time. And they would have to take time off, not time off from their duties, but time off from working the streets to attend something that I was training. And I would train thousands of officers throughout the United States all the time. We were training constantly. We are training to failure constantly. And so this concept that you're hearing that they're untrained, that they're making bad decisions, I'm going to debunk that right now. All right, so here we go. So let's do the math. So calls for service last year were 50 million calls for service. And of course, that's been rounded down or up, one of the two, but 50 million is just a good round number. And unarmed suspects killed were 50. Now, that doesn't mean there was an error. I'm going to go ahead and come back to my screen. So just because I'm telling you 50 suspects were shot and killed does not mean it was bad, right? But there are a few in there that, oops, I thought he had a gun. He didn't have a gun. I thought, I was trying to shoot the bad guy that's over there. And then his girlfriend was in the way and we shot her instead. Those are times where somebody died because of the activity happening around. And only a couple of those 50 were actually, what we would say, that was an accident. Those 50 unarmed does not mean they weren't violent. Most of them were violent. Most of them were trying to take a gun from a police officer, which would actually make them armed. But in the process of trying to take that gun, they never got it. And we had to shoot and kill them, or we had to stab them in the neck and then move it so that they would, it would open them up and then they would die from being bled out. And so I just want to make sure that that's clear. And I don't want you to think that that's an error, that 50. So this means that just last year, and I want to thank Greg Gutfeld for doing the math on this. I didn't do the math. I probably couldn't have done the math, but he did the math. But the math is that 0.00001%. And again, I'm going to use error only because it just is going to help with this thing. I'm going to say, let's just say it was error because the errors are actually less. You may be able to add another 0 in there and you may be more correct, right? And so only 50 people dying is not good, but in many of those cases, they made the choice and that's how they got killed. It wasn't that the officers went out there and sought people out and decided, we're going to go kill somebody. That's not what happened in those 50. In those 50, there was a call that happened or a visual of something going on that was criminal activity. And then what followed was that somebody that was unarmed died. All right. I had to use that figure because it's really hard to find the ones where it was an accident. I haven't been able to do that yet. But just unarmed, and I'm really hammering this point because I want to make sure that you understand that this doesn't necessarily mean it was an error. All right, so we are having all these riots. We're having all of this, things in Congress. We're having all of these changes and defunding the cops and dismantling the cops because 0.0001% of the time something bad happens and unfortunately somebody dies that wasn't armed. And we were being told it's because cops are bad and they're systemically racist, but yet. And they tell us that they're being killed every day. That's also what we've been told. I've been hearing that a lot, that every day an officer kills a black man. That's not possible. It's not happening. All right. Now let's look at the medical field. So there's less medical procedures than there's calls. 35,416,000, and this is in 2016. This is the earliest I could find, or the closest to 2020. So in 2016, 35,416,020 medical procedures. Out of those procedures, 251,454 people died due to errors. Errors. That is 9.5%. But wait a minute. You want cops to be better than that. You want them to be perfect. They're pretty close to being perfect. Even with all the bad cops that we have, which was, again, a very small percentage, we still only have a 0.001% of the time where somebody's killed when they're unarmed. And again, not necessarily made a bad decision to do that. And in little writing there, I have 9 were black and 19 were white. Out of those 50 that were killed that were unarmed, 9 were black and 19 were white. So you're still looking at even a smaller percentage when it involves blacks. But then when medical doctors with less medical procedures than calls for service, when they make errors, it's happening 251,454 times where somebody dies. There's other studies that show that it's actually 440,000 people die because of medical errors. There's other studies that show it higher. I use the lower number, and the lower number still is 9.5%. My point that I want to make sure that you understand there is that you're asking police officers to be better than doctors, and they are. They are. Doctors have, oh man, I'm so sorry. Let me fix something. April's going to yell at me about my autofocus. Let me turn this off. Sorry. So the point is, again, that we're asking officers, and if somebody would have said that and said they need to be better than anybody else out there, but they're not. They are. They're a lot better. They're 0.001% of the time do they actually take, and it's going to be less when it involves somebody that doesn't have a weapon that somebody is killed. I don't know how much more perfect we can be. I said this yesterday. I said it probably 2 or 3 times yesterday and the day before. Is that the problem with the fact that the problem with law enforcement is the same thing that the problem that we have in churches is that there's people in there, and people are not perfect. The situations are not perfect. You're asking cops to be perfect 100% of the time when the environment is not perfect, when the situation is not perfect, when they're having to respond to the aggression of somebody else. They are not actually the aggressors. They are having to respond to aggression. And you're asking them to be perfect in a non-perfect world, in an imperfect environment, in the middle of the night when you're all sleeping, and at the end of a 12.5-hour shift. You're telling them to be perfect. They are pretty close to being perfect, 0.001% of the time. I don't know what else we can do. How much more training are they trying? Are they trying to take the human out of it? We're human. We make mistakes, and on occasion there's a bad cop. And even with the bad cops, it's still a pretty low percentage. We do need to get rid of the bad cops. But we're going to have rioting in the streets because you have been told that we are bad people, that we are systemically racist, that we are purposely going out there and killing people, and that we make bad decisions every day, all the time, constantly, that we are not well trained, that we shouldn't be going on these calls, that a social worker should be going instead. Before I jump off, because I promised myself I would keep this down to 30 minutes. One more thing I got to tell you is the stuff that's being brought up and talked about, I'm just so concerned because what was it? New Mexico came out, well, we're replacing cops with social workers. And a lot of calls, not entirely, but with a lot of calls. And there's going to be more death. I don't even know how to put it, because the calls aren't always what they turn out to be. They're not always what they turn out to be. I can't tell you now if there's any officers on there. If you want to comment and put your comments on there and saying that you understand that how many times was a call exactly what it came out across the radio. So you're driving there in your patrol car, right? And let's say my call numbers are 3K3. That's what they were on when I was a K9 Hammer. So you go 3K3. I go 3K3. 3K3 respond to a party call, and this is a true call. A party call on Sabina, whatever the address was on Sabina in Anaheim. I go 10-4, and they go 343. Follow up 3K3, or it's probably the other way around. Usually a 3K3 is a follow up, but it doesn't matter. But it's a party call. So together we go to a party. So instead, what they're going to say, hey, we're going to send somebody that is trained in loud noises and disturbances, and we can have somebody. We don't need a cop to go to a loud party call. There's actually loud music in an apartment. This was the call. The real call was loud music and loud noises coming from an apartment. Second story. and we go there, and sometimes as cops even we go, it's just allowed. And sometimes you cancel people, but for whatever reason we didn't cancel each other. It was late at night, 2 o'clock in the morning. Nothing else was really going on. Maybe it's 3 o'clock in the morning. It was really late, and or early, depending on on what you look at. And so we respond, and I have a ride along. My nephew's with me on a ride along. And we walk up the stairs and we're talking about, hey, what are you going to do on your days off? Blah, blah, blah. As we're walking to the call next to each other, we do quite often. Hey, what are you doing? How was your night? Oh, it was good. It was busy, blah, blah, blah. And you're walking up the stairs and you hear the loud music. Bah, 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 bah. It was Hispanic music. And we heard it. I go, shit, that guy's got his music loud, right? And we go and we knock on the door. And I tell my nephew, because this is the right thing to do, who was there on a ride along. And I said, wait at the bottom of the stairs until they open the door. And then once it's safe, you can come on and see how we handle the call. And so my nephew's name is Brian. So I say, Brian, wait at the bottom of the stairs. When I tell you, after we get in contact, I'll have you come up and you can see what's happening with the call. So we knock on the door. Nobody answers. Nobody answers. And all of a sudden, my nephew goes, hey, Andy. And I'm going, hey. I go, hold on. And we're trying to get in here. And we're pounding on the door. He goes, Andy. And I go, hold on. And he goes, Andy. And I go, what? He goes, men are jumping out of the window and they got guns. And suddenly now, and we boot the door open. We go in. We got to see a guy go out the door with a M16 jumping out the window, out from the second story. I run down the stairs. I'm chasing down 2 guys with guns, and we're running down the alley. I pop my door for my police dog to come out. My police dog casts up one, takes one guy down, and then we get on the radio. We got armed men, 3 or 4 of them. We didn't know. 2 of them are women, 3 of them are men. They're all armed. They're running around their neighborhood. We set up a perimeter. We get the helicopter there, and it went to hell very quickly. We surrounded the place. We caught something like 3 out of the 4 or 5 people that were robbing this place. What they had done is they had everybody proned out in Anaheim. Of course, we had a high Hispanic community. In an apartment, you have 2 or 3 families living in a 2-bedroom apartment. They all keep their money at home, right? They don't put it. They put it in mattresses or they hide it in boxes, whatever it is. And these guys came in to steal everything. The loud music was to cover up the commands for telling the people to get down so they could tie them up by their hands and their feet and put tape over their mouths. The loud music was to hide all the activity that was going inside that apartment, right? The original call, what was it? Loud music. 3K3, 343, respond to loud music on Sabina. And we respond, all with our guard down. Now, what's going to happen when you send, Sally Smith to go, because her job is to handle all loud music calls, because what they have are like warnings. Hey, you're playing your music too loud. Stop doing that. If we have to come back another time, we're going to write you a citation. That's where most party calls would go. Do they always end up in a robbery? No, but I'm telling you, that is not an isolated incident. That would happen all the time. All the time, you would get a call. Hey, domestic violence. It's the suspect has left. Just go. The victim is asking for police to respond. As you're there, the guy had come back on the way there, and now you're in a hand-to-hand combat with the guy that came back in the middle of you knocking on the door. I can just go on. There's all kinds of different scenarios I can give you. I don't know. This is not a good idea to replace law enforcement with social workers, with civilians that are unarmed. I hear it all the time. Well, we're going to get some cops that are unarmed, and they're going to go and handle a bunch of these calls. Okay. Do you know how many of those are going to die? Do you know how many more officers are going to die? Officers died that are armed because they're getting shot through the door when they're knocking on the door. This is not a good idea for 0.001% of the time that we maybe make a mistake. Maybe. All this is for what? It's not true. It's not true. I'm telling you, I've been finding more statistics. I've been doing more work on this than anything else. And I've not found anything that I can find. I've not found anything that I can find. I've not found anything that justifies everything that we're going through right now. Nothing. Are there bad cops? Yes. Did George Floyd get murdered by a police officer? Absolutely. I'm just dumbfounded as I go into more statistics and research. Well, you're biased for police officers. No, I'm not. I testify against cops all the time. Cops hate me. A large community of cops. I have been erased from associations and organizations. I have been erased. And again, that doesn't sound good about cops, but again, they don't trust people who find them doing stuff that's wrong. That is a fact. That doesn't mean they are all doing something wrong. I think sometimes they feel like, hey, we're doing good out here and you're testifying against us. That is their view. And I say, no, I'm only testifying against the cops who are patently lying and doing the wrong thing. And because of that, I have been shunned by law enforcement for the most part. I have been erased from the organizations that I've created. 2 of them, I no longer exist in the minds of the history of any of those organizations that I founded and organized and created the bylaws for. I have been erased. But yet here I am telling you that the high percentage of cops are good and make the right decisions on a daily basis. 50 million calls annually, and 0.001% of the time somebody dies that's unarmed, which does not necessarily mean that they were wrong. So it's just important that you understand that, and that we're going to have a huge riot based on the words of a couple of attorneys and the media. The media that does this. I forgot I had this one too. This is another graphic I have. The media does this, right? They're saying on the left, and this is the New York Post cover, and it just points out that you have the hypocrisy that, hey, everything's okay. The group on the left, they're okay. They won't catch the COVID-19. They're immune apparently to everything. And so they're not going to say anything bad about them. They're so afraid to say anything bad because they don't want to be canceled, right? They don't want to be canceled on their Twitter, and they don't want to be fired because they said Black Lives Matter should not be getting together and protesting. They will not say that, but then they'll say, hey, you can't go out there and you can't go to a restaurant, you can't go to church, you can't do this. These are the people that are going to destroy our country because they are telling you that cops are bad. They're telling you that that the officer who was involved in the Atlanta shooting was scared, that he should have just let him go, that the guy was only sleeping in his car, that they killed him because he was sleeping in his car. That is not how he got shot. That is not why he was shot. But we're listening, not we, other people are listening. They're fueling this flame. They're putting gunpowder into this powder keg, and it's getting larger with every day. It's getting more filled with lies, misconceptions, and rhetoric, and it's getting larger and larger every day. And when that officer is found innocent, it is going to explode. Instead of what they should have said, hey, this was different than the George Floyd incident. This officer followed the procedure. I know it looks bad. You'll have little breakouts, little fires here and there. But if they would have been honest and said, listen, he followed the procedure. He couldn't let this guy go because he was too drunk. He didn't know where he was. He thought his wife was there. His wife was nowhere to be found, or his girlfriend, whatever it was, his bae. He thought his bae was there. His bae wasn't there. That his bae was driving the car. No, she wasn't driving the car. He was driving the car. They couldn't let him go, especially after he punched them in the face and stole their taser and fought them off like rag dolls. It couldn't let him go. I'm sorry. The only reason he got shot in the back is because he turned and shot. And then by the time the officer, reaction time, there's always reaction time. That is a fact. If they call me to come in and testify, I will talk about reaction time, that you cannot determine where the shots hit because of reaction time. It's an impossibility. You are seeing the shot in the muzzle flash and you're drawing your weapon and shooting, right? You're doing it as quickly as you can so that you can stay alive. But because of that reaction, it gives the suspect time to turn around, and now he's being shot in the back. The thought of shooting him was when he was facing him, pointing the gun at him and pulling the trigger. That's when the thought entered his brain to pull the weapon and shoot him. In reaction time, it gives the time for the suspect to turn around to show his back, and the bullets are already coming out. And there's no pulling them back, and there's no way of taking that decision back, because the officer thought at the time that he was being shot at that his life was in danger. That's all you need to know that this officer did the right thing, and he was given no choice but to shoot back at that suspect as he was running away. Sadly enough, he was shot in the back with 2 rounds. He fired 3 times. He missed one. He could have hit him 3 times. But and then what does he do? He applies CPR. He's giving him CPR to keep him alive. He's telling him to stay alive. He's talking to him. He never was so afraid that he did not do his job. They still continue to give him first aid, even though his attorney is telling you that they let him die, that they didn't give him first aid, that they kicked him. That's what I heard the attorney say, that the attorney said they kicked him. There's no evidence in any of the videos that I saw that anybody kicked him. All I saw was them giving him CPR. But what you're hearing and all you want to hear and all the media will show you is that the attorney said that he was kicked by the officer after he was shot, which is bullshit. And what's going to happen? Rioting, destruction, looting, because they didn't tell you the truth. And then perhaps this officer may get charged. He may get convicted, but I'm telling you, at some point, he is not going to jail because he didn't do anything wrong. I'm telling you again, I'm just going to repeat it because it's important, because some people join halfway through. I've been in law enforcement for over 30 years, 21 years as a police officer, the rest of that time investigating law enforcement officers and what they do while they're on duty, whether it was right or wrong. And I testify against police officers on a regular basis. And if I thought something was wrong, just like I saw that something was wrong with the George Floyd case, and I told you it was wrong. In this case, with the Rayshard Brooks case, he didn't do anything wrong. And it will eventually come out. I don't know what this DA is going to do. Again, if it was a clear-cut, closed case, they would already press charges on him. They know that they're in trouble, and they're trying to figure out how to get out of it. And it's going to be bad. All right, my friends, I got to take my son to karate. I appreciate you commenting. Please share. I really appreciate you sharing this out. I'm thankful that we have well into the 7,000 views just on one of the pages. This goes out on 2 different Facebook pages, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. I don't add all those up, so somewhere in the neighborhood about 7,000 or 8,000 people are viewing these videos. I appreciate it. Please share. People need to know and be prepared and hear the truth. It may save, a few people from going crazy when they hear it. Maybe they'll think, oh man, I thought it was something completely different. So it's helpful that you share it. I'm a small guy here in Orange County, California. 8,000 views is not a lot in the world of the internet. But if it just helps a couple people understand the truth, it may help somewhere. All right, my friends, I appreciate it very much. Got to go to karate. Just again, I appreciate just you being there and watching and sharing my message. All right, take care. We'll talk to you later. Bye.